September. I'm Kevin Hoare, and I'm here with the regular Wednesday co-host, Don Anderson. Don, how you
Happy to
doing?
be here. Doing fantastic. Happy to be here as always.
So we've had an exciting 24 hours in Oregon politics, and we're going to really delve into this. We promised our viewers and listeners that we would talk about what the debate last night, the governor's debate, and I think we're going to cover the fifth congressional district debate on Friday because, frankly, they had two debates at the same time. Uh, and I just didn't have enough hours to go watch them all. But I do recommend that people take the time to watch the actual debates because you know what? The media, it's interesting to see how they interpret what happened in these debates. And you can see the real candidates yourself. And ooh, don't you think that we learned a lot about Ms. Tina Kotek? Last night. That was so. Let's just start right there. Um, what was your kind of instant impression of the debate last night, which was in Bend between Betsy Johnson, Tina Kotek, and Christine Drazen?
Well, I was kind of struck by it seemed like Kotek didn't spend a lot of time talking about the accomplishments of the party. I mean, like there was none of that. Um,
There were some.
yeah. Well, it kind of begs the question, doesn't it? So, so I
Yeah.
thought that was interesting. I thought it was interesting how Johnson did nothing but attack Kotek. She attacked Kotek more than Drazen did. So I
Oh
thought
yeah.
that was another thing that was very interesting. Um, so it was just a referendum on how awful that party has done. That was just my general impression. We get into more specifics, but that was kind of my general impression.
Well, so I'd have to say you're right that it seems like Betsy Johnson's strategy is to spend all her time attacking Tina Kotek. She has to because, first of all, she doesn't really have a voter base. She says she left the Democrat Party and she's running against the Democrat nominee. But also, she was part of the Democrat Party and in the legislature for 20 years. She was there longer than Tina Kotek was.
Mhm.
She was a powerful state senator, chair of the Judiciary Committee. You know, the one that kind of oversees whether our laws are being properly crafted and faithfully executed, and our justice system is functioning. You know, that thing that isn't doing any of those things right now. She was in charge of that committee. And the only thing I found the entire time that I heard from Tina Kotek that I actually agreed with is that she went and attacked Betsy Johnson and Christine Drazen, saying, "You don't have any signature pieces of legislation that you ushered through the legislature." And of course, Christine Drazen immediately pointed out, "It's like I was in the minority. The minority has zero power. Like if you are not in the majority in the state legislature in Oregon, you don't have the ability you have the ability to do nothing but just agree with the majority or say your piece and vote, and then that's it, right? And then
Mhm.
the majority rules. So you don't usher pieces of legislation through the legislature. You do try to find people to come over and find common ground with you. She did point that out.
Mhm.
Um, the sick joke that Tina Kotek made, that she spends all of her time and experience shows that she knows how to reach across the aisle. And I think the only time she reached across the aisle is when she was punching somebody in the face on the Republican side. Because that when Democrats say that, that usually means that we're reaching across the aisle to tell you that you have to come and agree with us, and then we'll let you vote for our legislation. Nice, but not to find compromise. So what? But I did agree with Tina Kotek when it came to Betsy Johnson. She goes, "Betsy, you don't have any signature pieces of legislation." There, she's got a point. Where are the pieces of legislation, the Johnson bill, that does X, Y, or Z? And the answer is it's nowhere,
Yeah.
because she was somebody who she cast some no votes on some Democrat bills, but she voted for quite a lot of what they did, including massive tax increases, huge spending,
Mhm.
regulation, people that she approved gubernatorial nominees to head up state agencies who Christine Drazen has said she's going to fire them all. And boy, do they need to be fired. And what really I found interesting is that Betsy Johnson didn't have an answer for that. She goes, well, I can't go into the technical machinations of the legislature. Like, okay, well, I guess that the answer is you just didn't do anything. And I know that one of her campaign slogans is don't be a spectator. You know what a spectator does? Spectator doesn't lead. Spectator doesn't get their hands dirty and make things happen. They sit on the sideline, and then they every once in a while just convey their disapproval of something, like voting no on a bill and then doing nothing to actually stop it. That is what Betsy Johnson came across as to me. But she had a lot of good quips and one-liners. It's just that, wait a second. Christine Drazen pointed out over and over and over again that if you don't like what you've got now, and we know this is a change election year, and dissatisfaction with the state government and the current governor is very high, then the two people that she's running against are responsible for it because they were in charge. So that was one message I got. And then the other message I thought Tina Kotek walked right into herself. Every issue they debated, one of them was about government regulations. What can we do for small business? Remember that part? What can we do to help small businesses, and grow the economy and blah, blah, blah. And Tina Kotek, bunch of happy talk about how we have to bring people together and we have to have a dialogue. And I talk to businesses all the time, and we're going to find a way to make this happen. And she said, and we'll look at regulations and how to make things easier for businesses. But then she turned around in response to what was said by Christine Drazen and Betsy Johnson, which is that they thought we got to get rid of a bunch of regulations because businesses are overregulated. Betsy Johnson could have done as a state senator, but she didn't do that. But Christine Drazen said that she will. Tina Kotek attacked both of them and said, why don't you tell me which of our fantastic regulations, which she listed some of them, are you interested in getting rid of? And Christine just said, well, we're going to review all of the regulations. We're going to find the ones that don't work for Oregonians, that are harmful to what Oregonians are trying to do, and we're going to get rid of them. That's it. And then she turned to Tina Kotek and said, but isn't this so typical of what is wrong with our state and why Tina Kotek must not be our next governor? Because she repeatedly, over and over, defends the status quo. She plans to do exactly what we've already been getting. She wants to continue doing that. In fact, she just wants to spend more money on it. And I thought that was a powerful point that was made. Tina Kotek doesn't want to change course or direction. She just wants to do more of the same of what's been happening.
I'll tell you one point where that was particularly poignant was the part about the is it Bill 110 and this drug
Measure 110. Yeah, that was the one passed by the people, but then that's the one that has decriminalized hard drugs and kind of unleashed. Well, we'll talk about that here today, but that's
it's clearly, if there's anything that hasn't worked, it's that.
Yeah.
And Tina Kotek was like, we need more of that. We need to spend more money on it. We haven't given it a chance to work.
Just need more time and more money. Which has been the answer to every single thing that they've been doing that costs a lot of money and fails. Education, more time, more money.
If there was ever a point of separation, I think it would be that. That was like amazing.
Well, and there was a point that Christine Drazen made, which I thought was also powerful about Measure 110. And I think Betsy walked right into this one. So they both Betsy and Christine said they would want to get rid of Measure 110 to repeal it. Betsy said she voted against it, but she voted against it like you and I voted against it, at the ballot box, that kind of thing. However, Betsy then said, and there was a disingenuous campaign waged to fool the voters into voting for Measure 110. And we know what that was. It was, hey, we're going to tax cannabis sales and we're going to get a bunch of drug treatment money from that, and then we're going to make sure that we help people recover. And then blah blah blah. Don't stigmatize people if they have, if they're addicted to crack and meth and all that stuff. And then in small print, well, then we're going to decriminalize all these hard drugs, which a lot of people didn't find that out until the day after it passed,
Right.
In the national news, and now they're finding out what the consequences are of that. Well, and the point was well made by Betsy Johnson. Attractive place, it turned Oregon into an attractive place for using and abusing drugs, for homelessness, and for all the crime and squalor that is engulfing cities like Portland. Yeah, she's right. But she said it was a disingenuous campaign. However, after it passed, it was up to the state legislature to pass what they call enabling legislation. The purpose of that is to implement Measure 110, right? And Christine voted against it. Republicans voted against it. But Betsy and Tina voted for it.
Yeah.
Now, I know why Tina voted for it. She thinks it's awesome.
Yeah.
It's awesome. We just have to try harder and spend more money and need more time. But Christine said, Betsy, but you voted for this enabling legislation. Why did you vote for enabling legislation when you believe that a disingenuous campaign was waged to pass it in the first place? Are you for enabling the results of disingenuous campaigns? All I can say is that actually sounds like a Democrat to me. But but here's the results that Christine enumerated. 20% increase in overdose deaths since Measure 110 has been implemented. 18% of all Oregonians are addicted to one of these serious substances, which includes alcohol. And she made the point that you can't address homelessness, the problems with our schools, and the problems affecting our families if you don't do something about Measure 110, which is making them all worse.
Yeah.
Great. That's a great point. So I heard time and again these very sober, salient points made that define Tina and Betsy as the people who gave us what we've got. They voted for things that helped enable that precisely. And now Betsy has a change of feeling about it. She feels differently about it. But she voted for some of this stuff, and Tina thinks it's still awesome, and we just have to do it more. Christine's like, well, how about just not do the wrong thing so we don't have to clean up like that?
Yeah, you almost, if there's any honor there, you almost have to say Tina is more honorable than Johnson. At least that's what she thinks.
Yeah, she's more honest and direct about what she thinks. She was getting a little hot under the collar, though, because she was like, well, if you're not going to, why don't you tell us what you're going to do to get rid of regulations and, which one of everything's great. What's wrong with you? I mean, it was kind of that feeling. And yet at the same time, Tina was talking out of both sides of her mouth. Here's what she said, which kind of just shocked me. They talked about the pandemic, the closure of schools, stuff that Tina did nothing about, nor did Betsy. They both said, well, now it probably wasn't a good idea. It was closed for too long. I was opposed to that back then, secretly. And but Tina said that the Oregon Health Authority was incompetent and Kate Brown was absent. Who was the most powerful politician in the state? And after the governor, who? Tina Kotek was for 10 years.
Yeah.
So she said the Oregon Health Authority is incompetent. Where were those hearings when they drug the Oregon Health Authority people in front of the state legislature on live TV and hammered those guys for being incompetent? Where was that?
Yeah.
Nowhere. Kate Brown was absent. Tell us, Tina, about these tough conversations you had with Kate Brown about being absent. Where was that? The most powerful, and then repeatedly, and Christine Drazen pointed this out, you had repeated opportunities to rein in the governor, to curtail her ability to impose by executive order mandate after mandate after mandate, school closure after school closure after school closure, and really harm our economy and our children and our schools. And you didn't support any of the bills that were proposed by Republicans to do this.
Yeah.
They stuck to the political line. So it's like they say they want to solve problems. They are the problem.
Yeah.
Christine pointed out how that's I thought that was an accomplishment of this debate.
I mean, their previous governor wanted to get rid of standards. I mean, totally get rid of standards. It's just like, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, they all seem to agree now that they have to raise standards, except that they already voted to lower them. And then by voting to lower them, the damage is done. They've actually said that they bailed out the education system for being a failure. And as we saw in the recent news, like we've got a problem with about 60% of kids unable to read at grade level or do math, which is pretty shocking. And so who pumped money into the education system without accountability?
Yeah.
Tina and Betsy.
The usual suspects.
Yep. And now coming back to, there was a couple of topics that were interesting. First of all, they asked a question about fighting wildfires, but the media person phrased it as pretty much a result of climate change. And the last I checked, wildfires are a thing all by themselves. And climate change, you can go ahead and try to say that it has affected wildfires, but you can't say that it is the sole cause. And that we were having those long before anybody was pointing towards climate change as the cause. So what they said is just do everything we say on climate change, be the best fighter against it that you can be, and then we'll change the weather, and then the wildfires will end. That's effectively what we said. And Tina Kotek, she basically said, I don't want to hear any more about forest management. Well, I guess you didn't know anything about it in the first place because you aren't doing it. Not properly. And so now we have all this fuel load that builds up in these forests around the state. And as soon as there's a lightning strike or what do you call it, a campfire that's not put out, or even just some crazy dude trying to light fires, as we have seen people arrested for, then you end up with wildfires, except that they're much worse because they've allowed the forest to become tinderboxes by not managing them.
They always want to manage things that are way outside the purview. I mean, even if you made the presumption that climate change was something that man could control 100%, which I don't believe, but the state of Oregon is going to affect the entire world. Control the thing in your back. Control the thing you're empowered to control, which is the land management right here, and they just won't do it.
And this is on state land, because the land that's not on state land and federal land is being managed effectively by people who own that land. But then the government doesn't seem super interested in making sure that they prevent really out of control or put out quickly the wildfires before they can become really large ones. And so, there are things that can be done beyond that. They referred to resiliency, water stores being held in different locations, pre-positioned so they can better fight these fires, just being proactive. And Christine pointed out some of this, but she also said, I think it was 1 million tons of CO2 from the wildfires was released. If what you really care about is CO2, that amount of CO2 released from the wildfires in 2020 was the equivalent of all the cars driving on Portland roads for an entire year. You'd think they'd be a little bit more concerned about preventing wildfires by managing the forest properly. But, I thought it was a revealing debate in that they They talked about what they were going to do, but there was only one candidate that represented a strong departure from what has been done and what each of their records show, and that was Christine Drazen. They talked about water. Again, they talked about it in the context of climate change, but actually the government's pretty badly managed the water aquifers and the supply, especially in Southern Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a discussion. Each one of them got to comment on this and talked about what could be done. But Tina comes out and says it's a top natural resource issue. She says she's talked to farmers, and the state has to be a strong partner. But then she kind of goes into the bureaucraties of permitting, groundwater, being fully vetted, sitting down with environmental groups, coming to agreement with groups that don't want to come to agreement. And
Yeah, is that language? Is the language of liberals coming together, sitting down, talking? It's never action oriented. We're going to do this, that, and this, and get this result. You notice this? It's always that way with them. It's
Yep.
like it's really hard to listen to.
It is really hard to listen to because it's
down just to talk,
garbage, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and actually, we do have a problem. We talked about it last night on Captive Audience with Representative Ewan Oreshki from Klamath County, that they've got homes that are going to become unlivable if they don't find a way to start tapping new wells, because if they don't, then you won't be able to do any of the things you and I both know we need water to do: cooking, cleaning, drinking, bathing, showering, etc., flushing toilets. There were good ideas brought up by Betsy Johnson, but it sounds like stuff that she came up with that needs to be done now, that she was in a position of power for 20 years and could have fought tooth and nail for already. And Christine is like, we actually really, if you elect Tina Kotek, you will have less water. That's it. She said it, and I'm like, very simple.
Yeah.
There was a good discussion about supporting small businesses, and I mentioned before about the regulatory environment. They talked about what happened with Intel. Was one of the stories, and how the state just simply didn't return phone calls to the state's most lucrative employer, and so that employer decided to locate new expansion to Ohio, and instead of Oregon. Like, we don't have land here. And what became pretty obvious from Tina Kotek here, she said, well, people are really struggling, and we did some things, the payroll system and some tax breaks, and we spread the love around. She says she wants to be a customer service oriented, consumer focused governor. And I laughed out loud when I heard that. This is the Speaker of the House, when it took 8 months for emergency unemployment checks during the pandemic to get to people in Oregon. 8 months.
Yeah.
Where she was speaker when they had they spent $300 million on a website that didn't actually produce healthcare for people, health insurance. You just name all the things that don't work. I'm like, that's a nice slogan that some consultant dreamed up, and you can say during a debate, but it is laughable that she said it. And Christine Drazen said, here's the truth. Business owners are being crushed. They're desperate for change. They've had it with the statewide mandates. They've had it with the politicized decision-making by a single party control. And I said, Tina doesn't want to change anything.
And I don't know, did they address the police issues at all? I don't
That
recall
was a
hearing.
shocker. No. They started off the debate by talking about what's going on in Portland, and they talked about it specifically in the context of gun violence.
That's right.
Right. So they said that the real problem in Portland is gun violence, because guns, of course, jump out of glove compartments and shoot people. And of course, if you have more gun laws, then and they they Christine said, "Look, I'm a supporter of the Second Amendment, and I don't think the government should be deciding how you defend yourself in your home." Betsy is kind of in that same position too. However, she said she's open to more gun laws after what happened in Texas a number of months ago. But Tina's all in. She loves this. She thinks that everything is gun violence, and what you do is you just fight against guns, and then violence will go away.
Mhm.
But if you're really just if you're making it impossible for law-abiding citizens to own, possess, and own and use for their own defense a gun, are you going to stop criminals
Well,
who commit crime
yeah.
from committing gun violence?
Mhm.
Are you going to stop them? I don't seem to recall that many of them rely heavily on legal guns to begin with.
Well, for one thing, we got how many more laws do we have against men, about guns than we had 20 years ago? There's like freaking tons of them. So as the laws have increased, the gun violence increased along with it, right? So the laws have absolutely nothing to do with it. And then out in Bend, I think that was one of the cases they were talking about. I guess somebody went out there and shot some folks out in Bend. The person was obviously like off their rocker. So rather than talking about how do we identify these people who are off their rocker? As most of these cases, there are obviously signs, I'm sure, that this person shouldn't have been out in the public. Why aren't we doing that?
We actually covered that on the captive audience, and when we dug into the story, it turns out that like half the community that knew this guy and knew he was a nutcase, threatening to kill people, had been doing it since he was in high school.
Mhm.
And we have red flag laws in the state, which are supposed to be used to go and prevent someone like that from harming people.
Mhm.
But it didn't work. They didn't do it. So instead, the solution is to go take guns away from law-abiding citizens who don't intend to harm anyone unless they're being assaulted or attacked.
Right.
Do you think a mentally ill guy like that, I'm assuming he's mentally ill, but he's certainly pretty evil, is he going to be stopped because some law is standing in the way?
Basically, what it does is it puts all the rest of us at higher risk because now you can't defend yourself.
Yeah.
Unless, of course, you yourself get a gun illegally, which is all these laws will cause to happen. People often stop getting guns. So now your law-abiding citizens won't be liable law-abiding. That's what they're going to cause.
So there was an interesting discussion towards the end of the debate, which if you're watching it live online, you had to watch it streamed on the internet because it wasn't televised here in the Portland metro area. Even though last I checked, I think the governor would be also the governor of the Portland metro area, but okay. They had a very interesting discussion about walkouts, about what was being done to businesses by the cap and trade bill, and also by something that was called the cat tax. It's something that has really hurt businesses because it taxes them on revenue, and it leaves them in many cases unable to to operate profitably in the state. Well, Christine Drazen hammered on that and said, that is hurting people. I will hold the line on taxes. We're not going to have any more of this stuff. She said there's no limit to how much you can grow government if you're determined to do that. And she said our opponents both have been doing that and enjoy doing that, actually. Betsy had to admit that she did vote for it, but that she thinks we should take another look at it. Maybe it was something she needs to reconsider. So she can't unvote for something that has raised taxes. Tina Kotek just pretended like the cat tax as a concept didn't exist because she called it the Student Success Act and said that big businesses were just begging to have small businesses taxed by the cat tax in order to pay for $2 billion of something called the Student Success Act. If there's anything that hasn't happened since that passed, it's student success.
That's for sure. That's for sure.
It's the Expensive Student Failure Act, and it's the Low High School Graduation Act. It's all of those things, and and they had a very good discussion about it. And I thought Christine came way out ahead on that one.
Mhm.
And then they concluded by talking about the walkout.
Mhm.
And Tina Kotek tried to attack Christine Drazen about it, saying it was time for bold leadership. And that's why we had this cap and trade bill, which, by the way, Kate Brown tried to implement through executive order.
Mhm.
When she couldn't get it through the people's elected representatives, she says, well, I'll just do it anyway. The heck with those people.
Yeah.
And so instead of forging a compromise, and actually there were very few compromises needed in order for the Democrats to still get much of what they wanted in the bill, but they refused. Then bold, something that's going to boldly destroy the economy in many parts of the state and many jobs required a bold response. And Christine Drazen was explaining, and the bold response is that we had to walk out. It was the only tool we had left.
Yeah.
And the state had been crushed by single party control, and we had to stop disastrous legislation, which the Democrats have done in the past as well. Kate Brown was a state senator who said, well, it's all we could do. This is the only thing we could do.
Yeah.
So, and then all of a sudden she got cut off and I didn't get to hear the rest of the answer. She must have been giving way too good an answer at that point. We had to end that.
Yeah, of course. We've never heard that before, right? Never had that before.
So there's one other piece of legislation or legislative news that we should talk about in the governor's race, or well, a few. Why don't we just only talk about the governor's race tonight? Because there's other news, but I think this is probably at the top of our list for the night. There was a poll that came out this morning. It was conducted by the Oregonian, or commissioned by the Oregonian, conducted by DHM Research, which is a Democrat polling firm. And something very interesting came from this. It showed that despite all the stuff that we've been hearing about how Betsy's, doing this and Tina's doing that, Christine Drazen is ahead, 32% to 31%. And Betsy Johnson is at 18% support. That's way behind for Betsy.
Yeah. And that's pretty impressive in a state where every single major media thing is doing everything it possibly can to interfere with the message of Drazen, including the Oregonian. I'm pretty shocked they even published it. I think one thing too, I'm not sure what the percentage number is, but there are people who aren't going to tell pollsters what they really think because of the way Republicans or conservatives are treated. So you probably could throw another 5 percentage points on top of that just for that. And I don't know if that's true or not, but I think a lot of people argue.
You're right. You're right. Actually, they've been talking about this openly. People who are pollsters are saying that actually it has been very difficult to capture fully Republican sentiment and likely turnout because Republicans just don't trust the pollsters, who they kind of identify with the media, and they don't trust the media. And I wonder why.
I don't know. I can't imagine why.
What could have so damaged their confidence in the media, Hunter Biden, and
that speech the president gave. I don't know.
Yeah,
might add something.
So what? So that you're right. They're probably undercounting it by several percentage points, and also it really isn't at all likely that somebody who's at 18% can catch up and close the gap with candidates who are at 31 and 32%.
Mm-hmm.
So people are saying, well, Republicans can't win. Well, Republicans leading. Betsy can win. Actually, no, math. She can't. 18%, sorry. That's it. She's going to run out of time here, and she's spent millions already. So waste of money, waste of your vote. Meanwhile, Christine did a great job in this debate last night we just talked about, and she represents an actual change in direction for the state, and she's leading. And there's a lot of support coming in, even from the national level now, that people saying, well, I think Oregon could actually go save itself here from what's been happening.
Yeah. 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 And it's rational. I mean, this is one of those things where you don't have to be a rocket scientist. Just look around you. It's the place has gotten more dangerous. The city's gotten more filthy. There's more fires. Price inflation's through the roof. I mean, pretty much every which way you slice it, you see disaster. And who's been in office for what, 40 years now? You can't blame it on anybody else. I mean, just that by itself.
Well, they might blame it on Biden, except that that's like shooting themselves in the foot, because they were all big supporters of him, and so if he's ruining their chances, I'm sorry, but it couldn't happen to a nicer party instead of candidates.
Well, they have earned it.
And what you mentioned about inflation is extremely consequential right now. Oregon, due to a shutdown of some of the refineries that we're depending upon in California, we don't have the refineries up here in Oregon, led to a 50 cent increase in just 1 week in Oregon in gas prices.
Wow.
50 cents. So that's big. And then at the same time, Democrats have decided that it's a super awesome idea to kill off the final natural gas generator project in the state. There was one that was grandfathered back to before 2020. It was started in 2015, but environmentalists kept suing it, and then finally the regulators have killed the project, and that means that we're hurtling towards dependence on solar and wind, especially as they try to shut down dams. So if you like having power, you might want to make some other plans in the state of Oregon, because they killed the last natural gas power plant that could come online. They killed it dead in Eastern Oregon. I just posted the article about that. So they are taking us in the wrong direction. I mean, changing who the governor is will be the beginning of stopping us hurtling towards the cliff of being, and they want to force everybody to go and become more dependent on the electrical grid that they're making less reliable by everything they're doing, which is frightening. Well, a couple other things on the governor's race that I think are worth mentioning. So Tina Kotek's made a little bit of additional news. First of all, she was somebody who condemned what is known as dark money. It's supposedly where you're collecting money or getting support financially from entities that are not that don't have to report who their donors are, particularly 501c4s. Well, it turns out that Fox News did a investigative report and discovered that none other than Tina Kotek is one of the people who is taking this money. And it's crazy because she condemned it. She said that we've got to end the influence of dark money. And she's saying that here. And then over here, she's taking dark money from a group called Stand for Children, which is actually a union front group, public employee teachers union front group here in Oregon. But that's just the beginning, because not only is she doing that, but now she's promising, as Lars Larson pointed out, to cancel the death penalty law, except that governors don't get to cancel laws. They are supposed to faithfully enforce those laws.
But tyrants do. But tyrants get to change laws.
Tyrants get to do it all day long. And dictators are awesome at it as well. They are super awesome at canceling laws. And that is what you see in the countries that we still kind of look down on as being uncivilized. And then to top it off, Tina Kotek is now running ads that she's trying to link Betsy Johnson and Christine Drazan to the riots by Antifa in 2020.
The thing that's remarkable about these people, I've seen a few of those ads, and they never tout their record, their track record, or what they've done. It's just remarkable. I've seen this in Washington too. Where they have the Senate race up here, and you'll see the Democrat ad. They won't even mention the name of the Democratic candidate. In this case, I'm talking about Patty Murray. They don't even mention her name. It's all bashing the other person. You must be pretty bad if you're unwilling. You've been in office for 20 something years, and you've done nothing that you can speak to in terms of accomplishment. And you
Well,
see this
actually, the stuff they've been doing is so bad that they're probably ashamed of talking about the stuff they're doing now. And so just a little correction. So they were, of course, trying to claim that Christine Drazan had something to do with the rioters in the U.S. and in the Oregon Capitol at different points, and she had nothing to do with it. And they attacked Betsy Johnson on some other things with like owning a machine gun that's actually in a museum, which is, but here's the irony of this. And this article points this out very effectively. There is only one person that has a direct connection to actual rioters. And it is Tina Kotek. A member of her staff was arrested at a riot in Portland. And it made national and international news. Staffer for top Oregon Democrat arrested alongside 58 others during riots on the 101st night of protests in Portland back in 2020. And this picture of her staffer. Yeah, she was just hanging out with them because, I guess it was just fine to riot if you're Antifa.
Well, it's a protest, not a riot.
Yeah. And so this is what you're getting when you get Tina Kotek. It's worse than just bad policies. It's severe hypocrisy, and it is somebody who actually is projecting onto others and gaslighting others, while at the same time she's actually guilty of the things that she is claiming others are. And this doesn't sound like a big change from what we've experienced in the past. The only thing is, if you get a real sense of Tina Kotek, I think you can easily say that she's kind of more ruthless and much worse than Kate Brown. And Kate Brown's already the least popular governor in the country. I mean, how many times do we want to have to go and start recalling people? Let's just fix it in this election and elect Christine Drazan and not look back.
Yeah, you look at it and you wonder, because you're either really, I hate to use the word, I don't want to call anybody names, but let's say you have to be not very intelligent. I'm talking about the candidate now to be for these policies that they're for, or you have to be evil. I don't think they're that dumb. I don't think they're dumb. I don't see how else you can support a policy like less police, for example. It just doesn't make sense. You don't have to be rocket scientists to know what will happen, or letting people, or not enforcing, or letting people out on parole early, not enforcing sentencing. I mean, you do the crime, is the old Tony Beretta thing. You do the time, right? That's how it works. And you release these people into the streets, and crime's going to go through the roof. That's not rocket science.
So I'm going to prove you right, Don. Right now, here's 3 stories that I'm going to mention as we finish up here that prove that they know exactly what they're doing. They are not stupid, and they're diabolical in this regard. One is they're being told by experts who are offering a very harsh assessment of Oregon's drug decriminalization policy, Measure 110. And it's KGW, which is not known for carrying water for Republicans.
Yeah.
Just to be honest with you for a moment about what I know about how the media operates. But what they said was that this state drug policy here in Oregon, they're starting to warn other people around the country, like, don't do this. This is ultra stupid, and it has actually they quote encouraged drug use and has no deterrence involved with it. Now, deterrence is to convince people that they shouldn't even try to do this, that they should actually avoid drug addiction and engaging in, doing meth intents everywhere. And then once they start engaging in criminal activity, in addition to that they should count on being arrested, incarcerated, and forced to either spend their time in jail or go to rehab, which is what happens in most of the rest of the country. But he said Oregon's situation, he laid it out in stark terms, because the West Coast has an individualist culture with a tolerance for substance abuse. Social pressures to seek treatment are often minimal. So on one hand, we have highly rewarding drugs, which are widely available. On the other hand, little or no pressure to stop using them. Under those conditions, we should expect to see exactly what Oregon is experiencing: extensive drug use, extensive addiction, and not much treatment seeking.
Mhm.
So they're being told by experts this information. Now, if you know this information, do you still defend this idea? Or do you realize that actually what you're doing is you're taking a wrecking ball to the current society and destroying cities?
That
At
that
some
has
point,
to
you
be
got to
it.
admit, right?
Yeah, I mean, that has to be it. I mean, we've reached a point in Portland where, and I'm not exaggerating, you don't, not all of it, but there's places you don't want to go anymore. And your whole mindset about it is like you're looking over your shoulder. You're making sure you're not in certain places after it gets dark. There's places you're avoiding. It's never been like this before. Um, I've never been, I mean, I've lived in cities that have been like, historically much tougher reputations. And I was more afraid in Portland than I am in those places. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. And if
Right.
you want to go see people running around without their pants on, carrying metal pipes, chasing other people downtown, just go. You'll
Yeah.
see it tonight. It's
Yeah.
down there and it's not hard to find. And uh, so I just wanted to mention the second article, which proves you right, which is the media, theguardian.com, is celebrating Oregon's super awesome clemency program, which Kate Brown says is a historic use of clemency. We are a nation of second chances. The problem is, it's a nation of second chances for cold-blooded murderers, rapists. And when you read this article, you'll read what the people that are pushing this policy forward, including Eliza Kaplan, a professor at Lewis and Clark College,
Mhm.
who thinks this is great because people are just turning around their lives and becoming super awesome people after being vicious, cold-blooded murderers and rapists. One guy executed somebody execution style after taking them across the county lines, a couple different counties, and Kate Brown is determined to make sure these people get out on jail, not in just small numbers,
Mhm.
but in uh, by the thousands.
Yeah.
And she's granted more commutations and pardons than all of Oregon's governors
Mhm.
from the last 50 years combined. And they
And see,
think that this is historic because you know what they do with it? They're saying that this is so super awesome because it's a way of transforming Oregon's judicial system and erasing racism. Do you think this is a great way to erase racism? Eradicating racism and colonialism is the quote here. Does that sound
it is the most racist thing you could possibly and classist thing you could possibly do. So who's impacted the most by this stuff? These people aren't turned loose into places like Bellevue and Lake Oswego. I'll tell you
yeah,
that. They're turned loose in the southeast and northeast and these rural towns where people are just trying to scratch a living out, and it's those lives they get destroyed. So people like the Kate Browns of the world, they live in their 20 little neighborhoods behind gated communities with their private guards. They never feel the consequences of this stuff, which is part of the reason they love promoting it. Then they can pat themselves in the back and feel like they've done something for somebody, and they're just destroying the lives of these people.
yeah,
It's
and they're destroying
unbelievable.
communities, and they're doing it to the people who are least able to fight back against it and protect themselves. And so, and I think that uh, what we've been learning actually is that they are serious about it not only as a policy idea, which is using the clemency power to essentially usurp the judicial system that we have under the laws passed by the people's elected representatives and people who are tried and sentenced within our judicial system. They want to usurp all that by just having the governor issue a kind of executive order that just vacates all of it. for the
Yeah.
worst criminals. This is really damaging to our entire system of justice, and everybody needs our system of justice, equal justice, right?
Yeah.
And then here's how I know they're serious, and this is the final thing that proves Don's super right in your assertion here. Deschutes County District Attorney's Office receives nearly $1 million restorative justice grant, and they are, quote, seeking community facilitators. Well, let me tell you what that means. Oh, that all sounds happy and nice, except restorative justice is the crap we just described. They're celebrating that is supposedly eradicating racism and colonialism and turning our justice system upside down through the equivalent of an executive order from the governor. And they want to spend $1 million in Deschutes County so that they can create an entire system that takes what they say are young offenders and gives them an opportunity to redirect their lives, while simultaneously, they say, helping victims of crime achieve justice. Last I checked, there's a lot of crime victims pretty unhappy with what's been happening to the people that committed heinous acts against them, and now they're being released. Now there's a Soros-style DA in Deschutes County. His name is John Hummel, and he's very proud of this. He's thrilled. And they're going to put $1 million into it, and they are going to transform our justice system into one that apparently is going to go and cure all the people that commit crimes and set them back out on the street.
Well, words, I have no words, right? You have no words. They're evil. That is evil.
Especially when they frame it deceptively the way they do. They don't hold it accountable for results. The programs never sunset when they fail. And when they produce the kind of results that we see in places like Portland, like we've seen with Measure 110, they double down on it. They say we need more time, we need more money. And you just don't understand, Don. You just don't understand.
Yeah, it's just.
And you don't, by the way, you hate people that are supposed to receive these programs. Did you know that? You hate all people that are addicted to opioids. How dare you?
It's just horrendous. It really is.
Oh, by the way, you're a racist. I forgot to mention that.
Oh yeah, yeah. Of course I am. I'm totally a racist. and the reality is, and they throw that term out all the time, but no one ever talks about who's the victims of these crimes.
Yeah.
Right? It's normally minorities. You never see some reporter running and sticking their microphone in the face of somebody who just got raped or beat up by somebody of the same race. You never see that. All you see is the criminal this is like the 10th time they've been arrested or something, by the way, and how badly they were treated by the cops. It's like unbelievable. So you never get a real reading of what people really think because of the bias in the press. But
yeah, they filter it.
Yeah, most people want to pick up the phone, call the police, know the police are going to show up. That's what most people want.
And they don't want to call the police just to have chats and see if they can, test the system of responsiveness. They do it because there's a real problem, and they want to make sure that there's actual public safety protection. And so we've really highlighted some stuff today. We've talked about a governor's debate and a governor's race and a golden opportunity for a Republican governor to get elected in a state which needs a desperate change in direction, and that will only come from one candidate. That's Christine Drazen. And we've talked about what Kotek actually represents and just how awful and there's only one candidate that can beat her, and that's Christine Drazen. The polling makes it very clear. And then we've talked about what's happening to our energy infrastructure and energy supply, the prices, including of gasoline. And now we've delved into the failed policies that are perpetrating crime. They're actually pouring gasoline on the fire of opioid addiction and homelessness. And then on top of that, they literally are intentionally trying to release dangerous criminals back out on the street and rehabilitate others so they can get out sooner. Boy, I guess we couldn't give our listeners more today, could we? We really gave them full 9 yards and then some. And I hope everybody enjoyed listening in on our commentary on this. Any last words of wisdom here, Don?
Well, I would say, as negative as all of that sounded, there really is a huge silver lining in all of this, and that is that we now have evidence for just how atrocious, evidence that you can't ignore for how atrocious the Democratic Party is in the state and in the country, and we've seen the results of what they want. There's no dancing around it. They need to go. Any objective person looking at this would say, "Yep, they need to go." So there's the positive. And I think that we're going to have a really happy November is what I'm looking forward to. Christmas early in November.
And everybody's got to, by the way, support and contribute to these candidates. Any amount of money makes a difference. Any support you can give them, getting a yard sign, it all makes a difference now. And one last note, I think somebody requested here, Lori, one of our super fans, said, "Pray for Florida, please." I agree. Let's all take the time to pray for the folks in Florida, and of course in the Carolinas and elsewhere that are being impacted by the storms out there. This is something we should also do for the election, and pray, that we find that we actually have the strength to persevere and begin to turn things around in a place like Oregon and even in Portland, where it's so desperately needed. Don, thanks for joining me here tonight. I really appreciate it. It was great being with you here.
Thanks. Absolutely enjoyed it. Everyone take care.
And please share this show with everyone you know. Just share it with a few people, and you'll make them smarter. I guarantee it. Several points on IQ, guaranteed. They'll certainly feel like there's hope. They'll be well aware of the problems, but they'll also be well aware that there is a solution, and we are happy to bring that to you. We will see you Friday on the next episode of The Captive Audience, and we will be hearing from David Darnell and the new vice chair of the Oregon Republican Party, Angela Plowhead, who's going to talk about her experiences, what she sees happening this fall, and the prospects for our candidates here going into November. So please tune in, and I wish you a great rest of the week, and we'll see you on Friday.